Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. Today we have a very challenging build. We are making not one, but two matching Damascus daggers. Now, they're not just any daggers. They have a very unique joinery method between the handle and the blade in a way that you can actually see the pattern go all the way into and through the tang. And the pattern itself is kind of a take on a wraparound. So there's an outside bar of steel that wraps around the core bar of steel. And I'll be starting with two small bars of twisted mosaic Damascus that I've made a while ago. And I'll be wrapping them in plain old 1084 high carbon steel. There is a very small amount of actual pattern welded steel that's in this piece, but it's the way that I'm going to be forming and forging that core bar of twisted mosaic Damascus to the outside bar of steel that's going to give this set a lot of character. If all goes according to plan, it should look like a serpent of Damascus is slithering down the center of a black blade and into the tang. All of the forging steps have to go perfectly for this to work out. So let's start the forge and begin forging these two twin daggers. The first step to this process is preparing the 1084 high carbon steel wraparound for the internal twisted mosaic Damascus bit. To do this, I cut a slot down each of them with the bandsaw, and I'm opening it up now with a wedge before actually forming the bit itself to the inside of that slot. After cleaning off the bit and the inside of the wraparound, I can go ahead and tack weld them together and prepare them for the forge weld. These two small bars are actually all that I have left of this specific mosaic Damascus pattern, so I kinda need to nail this the first try. Now that the first billet is forge welded up, I can move on to the second. Something I didn't show for the first billet is a very important step of doing wraparounds like this, which is to hammer downwards on the outside of the bit to drive the tip of the bit into the wraparound further. Because if you're gonna have a flaw in a wraparound, it's usually gonna be at the very tip. Alright folks, so we have both of the billets for the two matching daggers in their preformed shapes. So the inserts have been forge welded inside of the 1084 jacket in a nice tapering triangular shape, but they are straight right now. So what we need to do now is grind off the scale, test etch them so I know exactly where that core bar is sitting, and I have done all of the mental work to make sure that the serpentine scallops that I cut into it before forging them flat are exactly where they need to be so I can get really nice serpentine activity out of that core bar in the final piece. But I'm gonna go over to the grinder, grind these things off, test etch them so I can see where the core bar is, and then we're gonna lay out all of our scallops, grind them in, get back out to the forge, and forge them straight into our final dagger billet. If you think about the end result of this pattern like a sound wave, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So my job is to reverse engineer that sound wave, taking the amplitude and the frequency into account, and remove just enough material at this stage so that when I forge it straight, that sound wave, or the core bar, will look exactly how I want it to look, but more importantly, look identical on both knives. Now that all the scallops are carefully ground into the steel, it's time to forge it straight with my full flat dies, during which process the beautiful serpentine pattern will be formed within the steel. It's now time to forge out the tangs. I have to do this very carefully and in the perfect spot so that the reduction of the pattern as it transitions into that fully etched tang looks just right. So I have the two dagger blades that don't look like dagger blades yet, surface ground down to very precise thicknesses, and you'll notice the blades are far too thick and also rectangular. But I've left them that way intentionally because, as you can see, I have drawn on where the core bars are in the steel. I am going to use those to perfectly orient the profiles of these daggers to the squiggly core bars so that they are perfectly centered, going right down the middle of the blades, and they line up really nicely with the center line. So let's get this stencil drawn on these guys and get them profile ground so they start looking like dagger blades. To get daggers perfectly symmetrical, I like to profile them probably about 85 to 90% of the way there just by eyeballing it and using my stencil, and then I will CA glue it to a 1-2-3 block as close to parallel with my surface plate as possible, cover it in blue Dicom, inscribe my center line along with all of my equidistant parallel and perpendicular lines to both set up my shoulders or make a grid pattern so that profiling is a lot less guesswork and I'm able to get a flawlessly symmetrical blade. So these two daggers are now out of heat treat. We were able to get the very small warps on them out using our straightening jig in the second temper cycle. And since then, I have just used my granite block and some sandpaper to flatten off all of those surfaces and get them back up to a nice 400 grit finish. I've also made sure that everything is perfectly flat and oriented. So this is parallel to this, and this is also centered with this in accordance to this, and this, and this, and that, and this, and this. So suffice it to say, these things are all calibrated, straight, and ready for the handles. We're going to be using two different woods, one beautiful block of desert ironwood and one of African blackwood. I really like the combination of these two colors, and I think it's going to look really nice as a set. So let's get the bolster and tang portions scribed onto these pieces of wood and begin the very tricky process of carving out the slots where these tangs are going to fit. The slot on the inside of this handle where the tang is going to sit is completely exposed. So if I take a little bit too much material off, there's going to be a gap there and I'm going to have to start over. So let's get those tangs and bolsters scribed onto our pieces of wood and begin carving out those slots for the tangs. I drilled oversized holes into the tang before heat treat and filled them up with mushroomed out brass, and also ground a groove along the inside of that tang. The brass is so that when I drill my pinholes, I don't have to worry about trying to drill through hardened steel, and the grooves are so that when I bed it, as I'm doing now, that epoxy will form a natural ridge inside that will automatically align the blade with the handle. So we now have this first dagger completely fit up, bedded, and drilled, and it is super tight. All that's left. Where's the other block? Donde está el block? What? Oh my gosh. So now that this one is fit up, I now just need to fit up this one. So let's go ahead and do that. I just showed you the hard way to fit up that block to the knife. Now I'm going to show you the easy way to do it on this other one, which is with a wand. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, fit up, dagger 2, Blackwood, ka-chow. Hey, what do you know? It's all fit up and nice. That was really easy. This is probably one of the more valuable tools you can have in your shop. A Highland Wizard is the best place to get these. This one is walnut, dragon heartstring, I believe. Now is time for the last major step in this entire build, which is finish grinding the blades. Edge itself is not going to start here. It's actually going to radius and roll into the edge, and the actual edge is probably going to start about a ½ inch up the blade. This is a fancier way to do a ricasso to edge transition. It requires a lot more precision in grinding. So let's get over to the grinder and get these things finish ground.
Many historical daggers had hollow grinds in them, but almost all of them had some sort of convexed edge, which means as the edge geometry approaches the actual apex, it transitions from a hollow grind to a convex grind, and it allows the edge to be very thin yet very strong, with that convex going all the way down to 0, so there's no secondary bevel. I'm implementing that grind on these two knives by essentially sharpening them with an 800 grit belt and then blending the hollow grind with the sharpened section and hand sanding, so there's no hard facets and it rolls beautifully into the edge. After getting the blade fully hand sanded up to 1500 grit, it's time to start finishing out the handles. The first step to this is adding the small facet that breaks the corner where the handle slopes inwards to the tang. Now this facet is kind of a continuation of the facet that's running around the top of the handle, so I have to be very, very careful and do this with tiny files and sandpaper to make sure it's consistent all the way around.
We have the blades completely done. They need to be etched, but first I'm gonna go and get the touch marks put on them before we can start the etching process. And as those blades are etching, I'm going to finish buff the handles. I put a really light coat of true oil on them because both African blackwood and desert ironwood are naturally really stable, but they have tiny little surface pores that I just needed to fill up with the true oil. That's gonna help bring out the color a little bit more and also make the polish pop just a hair more as well. So I'm gonna get those things touch marked and then we're gonna go into the etch.
And now with both Damascus blades etched and coated in carnauba wax and both handles polished to a high shine, I can finally permanently assemble these daggers. This was such a fun and challenging project. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to my page so you can come along with me on more builds just like this. I appreciate everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoy the finished Serpentine Damascus twin dagger set.